Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now let's welcome our main speaker tonight, Clancy.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. Very glad to be here tonight. I'll just take a minute to tell you a sad story that may make you weep but blink your tears away. I spoke last night at a big meeting in Milwaukee, and I had to be back for the grand opening of the Midnight Mission, the new Midnight Mission today at noon at Skid Row. And I got up at 4 o'clock this morning in Milwaukee and drove to the airport, got there about 5, and checked in, and they said, gee, your plane to Los Angeles has been canceled because it stops in Denver, and Denver snowed in. And I said, but I got to be there. They said, we can't help it. There's nothing to do about it. And I gnashed my teeth. And finally, they said, we'll push on Northwest, see what they can do. So they sent me to Minneapolis, for Christ's sake. And I sat in Minneapolis, and finally they put me on a plane to Los Angeles. I got here at 11:30 and zipped to Skid Row, just made it by the skin of my chinny chin. And I've been working there all afternoon, and I just realized I'm very tired. Good night. But I feel great, I'm sorry to say. Enjoyed Irene's talk very much. I really hate to waste my time doing this, but Bill Wilson in heaven has asked me to do this brief thing. In the San Fernando Valley in the mid-1960s, there was an old guy named Bill Davidson, and he is a strange old guy, and he had strange opinions about things. And for instance, he felt everyone in AA should be anonymous, not from public, but each other. He's just terrible. And when they would read the 12 traditions, as was read very well tonight, he would join in at the end and say, principles before personalities. You hear that? They say, oh, shut up, Bill. This went on for a while, and 4 or 5 young guys, well, I know, because I sponsored one of the guys, began mocking Bill. They would say, principles before personality. Is that right, Bill? He said, shut up. I'm not going to shut up. And this went on for a while, and then some guy from the Sylvan Seeders group went over there to speak one night and heard this and thought it was a new spiritual part of AA. And he took it back to the Sylvan Seeders group. Pretty soon they began saying principles before personalities. Nobody ever knew why. And for about 20 years, there were about 4 groups in the Central Valley where they all chanted principles before personalities. You'd go out there and say, why are you saying that? Because that's what we do. That's why. Which was all right. They'd say, what are you going to do tonight? I'm going to go out and talk for the chanters, you know. But then somehow the cork got out of the bottle, and the bacteria began seeping around Southern California. Pretty soon you'll go to some other meeting and say, principles before personalities. Why do you say that? Because that's why we say that. And little by little they begin saying at the end of chapter 5 too, as they did tonight. Nobody ever knows why. They'd probably say it at the end of the promises too if they knew what they were. But no, it's all right. I'm not knocking it. I think it's if you want to do it, that's fine. I'm not. I want to talk to the new people to tell you that it is really not necessary to chant. It's not done anywhere else. It's not done anywhere else. It's just a distraction from the group. I'm talking to you because once you've been doing it a long time, some of these guys 6 months sober, you'll never change them. They're set in their ways. We can never do anything about them. But you new people, I'm trying to save you while there's still time. And as I say, you can chant if you want to, chant, but you're really not doing anything in AA. You're mocking Bill Davidson, and he's been dead since 1971. Bill Wilson in heaven told me to tell you that. Okay. Anyway, I'm glad to be here. Alcoholics Anonymous is a very loving and wonderful place to many people once you get onto it, but it's kind of difficult times. And we sometimes get mixed signals here. You know, there seem to be different types of alcoholics. Nobody ever talks about it much, but there seem to be types of alcoholics. For example, there seems to be a type of alcoholic who, by any measurement, is an alcoholic, and something happens that really threatens their security. Maybe they lose a job or lose a family or a death in the family, and they quit, and they never drink again. And most of us know of people like that who have drank and never drank again. Then there's also that same type of person, when they become physically addicted to alcohol, they require medical withdrawal. A lot of people don't realize, we talk about the withdrawal from drugs. The withdrawal from alcohol addiction is much more lethal than the withdrawal from drugs. But that's why treatment centers were created, to withdraw these people step by step off the alcohol and teach them each step of the way of the chaos of their life. And these people come out of there and they quit, and they never drink again. In fact, there's a big hospital up in Seattle called Shadell, who specializes in that sort of alcoholic. And they have names by the hundreds of people they have recovered from alcoholism in less than a month. And that's the type of alcoholic. Then there's another type of alcoholic who seems to be an alcoholic by any way you measure it, and something happens to really threaten their security. Maybe they lose a job or a family or death in the family or something, and they quit. But they always eventually drink again. And the same type of people come out of treatment centers with tears of sincerity rolling down their cheeks, and they mean it when they quit. But they eventually always drink again. And this type of alcoholic are the people that have troubled everyone that's ever tried to help them in written records for 5,000 years. At one time, they thought they must be possessed by devils. They'd put them to death. They'd flog them and send them away and all sorts of things. And in current days, for the last hundreds of years, science is just trying to find ways, and medicine and religion and psychiatry and everybody's. And if you're an alcoholic in this room, you see the evidence you probably will see, as I have seen it, of seeing the face of someone who loves you or cares for you, and seeing that face full of, oh, how could you? How could you? You were starting to do okay, and the children were starting to come around a little bit, and you had your job, and here you are drunk again, you're going to ruin everything. And it sends a knife into the body. And so their response is, shut up and leave me alone, God damn it, because I don't know how to deal with it. But this type of alcoholic are the alcoholics that have always troubled everybody. They seem to be about 7 or 8% of drinkers seem to have this strange form of reaction to alcohol, and nobody ever knows why, and they can't understand it. And it's always been that way. But of course you say, well, now we have AA. That's right. In 1935, 2 of these alcoholics got together and found a way to work together. They got a couple other people, and over a period of time it's gradually grown a great deal. Now it's in 134 countries. It's in America, everywhere. There's a town in the United States with more than 2 stoplights who doesn't have an AA meeting or 2. In our Los Angeles phone book, there's over 3,000 meetings a week. It's just incredible. There's really, and we in this room are living in the heartbeat of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the hottest spot in AA in the world, right here, Southern California. They sometimes say, well, how about New York and Illinois? There are more sober alcoholics south of Santa Barbara than there are in New York and Illinois combined. They sometimes say, well, how about Akron? Isn't that the heartbeat of AA? Akron has the same relationship to AA that Bethlehem has to Christianity. Something nice happened there a long time ago, but not since. This is where it is. And so AA is everywhere. There's no need to die or go mad or anything. It's really a great thing. The only one small cloud in the sky is that according to the most reliable current figures from the National Institute of Health, alcoholics of our type, something over 95% of us still die drunk, or as a direct result of drinking. And you might, how could that be? Why would that be? Would anybody be that way? And you can read all sorts of psychological things into it. But it really boils down to the basic tenet of what an alcoholic is. The basic thought down deep of every alcoholic I've known is this: you don't understand. My case is different. That's all it takes. I watch people die from alcoholism every week, and I know the answers, and I can give them to them. And they say, but I know you mean well, but you don't understand. I'll tell you what. If you go down to the general hospital, county hospital, downtown, and go into the cancer ward and say things, you people with cancer, we've developed an answer to it, and we can help the first 50 people who apply. They would be out, they would crawl out of their beds and get to you and grab you and beg and plead with you. You go down the elevator to the AIDS ward, which is one of the sadder rooms in the world, the AIDS ward of the county hospital. Not because it's bad or dirty, it's just that it's full of people who are dying and there's no answer for them. And if you'd go in there and say, you know, there's an answer to AIDS now if you want to do something about it, they would crawl across the floor and lick your feet. Please, please. But you go down another floor to the alcoholic ward, and they won't go to a meeting. Guy lies in bed with his liver out to here. He said, I don't want you to go to your goddamn meeting. I'm not an alcoholic. And you come back next month, and he's dead, and there's a new guy in the bed explaining why he's not an alcoholic. I mean, that is the number one problem, and it really kills people. But not for everybody. You know, among alcoholics, there's a difference. Even of this type, there seems to be a difference of alcoholics. And in AA, we see them quite clearly. And you see a perfect example of them in this meeting tonight. There are people who come to AA, somehow are able to assimilate its message, who listen and believe what they hear, and they stay sober, and they glow at 5 years. There's other people who come here and can't stay sober and can't get it, and eventually go down and slip and slide. And that's what I did. I came as a high bottom drunk kind of, and I slipped and slid till I was a medium bottom drunk. And I went to AA from time to time, and I did this and that. I spent thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis when I was still had successful writer. I read books. I did everything. And the last day I drank, two big guys threw me out of a mission downtown Los Angeles and said, stay out of here, you goddamn mooch. I tried to explain, I'm not a mooch. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the LC Elmer ads for the Borden Company, were running that very week in Life and Time and New Yorker, Evening Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for my achievements. But it's really hard to explain these things in midair. And I stood outside that damn old mission, sick, raining, cold, desperate, had a terrible feeling, didn't know what it was, but I'm sure that some people in this room have had it, would identify with it. It's the feeling when you suddenly realize there is no longer any friendly direction. There's nobody out there who's going to be glad to see you, pal. And that is a lonely, frightening feeling. I stood in the rain. If some old guy had come up to me that morning and said, you know, Slim, you're dying. You're down to 120 some pounds. If you'd have said you've lost your wife and children, never see them again. You lost your career. Once upon a time they called you a boy genius. You can't even get a job washing dishes. You lost all your ID and your clothes when you lost that car. That guy you was driving for the guy. A guy hired me to drive his car from Dallas to Los Angeles. I took it to get out of the town, and I got drunk in Phoenix and lost the car with everything I had in it. And I got in a beef that night in the street. I got in the street, and they threw me in jail. And in the middle of the night, I got in a beef with the guy, and he kicked my front teeth out. So I remember Phoenix. But I'll tell you, I was laying on the floor, and he was kicking me, saying, "You drunk son of a bitch." That was one of the few mornings I was glad I'd been in psychoanalysis. I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking, this son of a bitch is overreacting. But I didn't want to say anything and make trouble. And I got out of that jail the next morning, sick and hot and desperate, all my stuff gone. And I had no way to get out of there because I couldn't think of anybody except to collect a phone call from me. So I went over to the AA, looked up the phone book, some Arid Club in Phoenix, went over there and hustled some old lady for $20. He helped me get into a 12-step house, which I used to buy a bus ticket to Los Angeles. I got a hold of a guy at KFWB who was a big star, and I'd given him his start. And he gave me quite a bit of money. And I drank that up and came. I told him I'd been in a car accident. I needed some money. I went back later and to get some more money, and he said, no. I called Dallas. You haven't had a car accident. You're a bum. Get out of here. Don't come back to KFWB. And I thought, Jesus, I said, Ted, I got to have something. I'm so sick, and I got no, my clothes are bloody, and I'm dirty. It's okay. It always reminds me of a Sunday night. He says, come to the back. At that time, KFW was on Hollywood Boulevard. Come to the alley back of there and stand below there at 9 o'clock. I'm going to come out, but don't come up the stairs. You embarrassed me the last time you were here. So I was out there standing in the rain, and he came out and threw a $5 bill that fluttered into a mud puddle, and I crawled out and got it. And I thought to myself, Jesus, how could I do this? And a couple of days later, 2 guys threw me out of a Skid Row mission. But if a guy had come up to me that morning and said, you know, you've been sitting in these AA meetings for years. Every time you're under a lot of pressure or somebody give you some heat about your drinking, you pretend to go to AA and take the heat off. And you keep going until the heat is off, and you laugh at these stupid little alcoholics, their little turn it over to God, little solutions. And now you're dying. You're an only child. Your little mother up in Wisconsin is no longer even allowed to accept phone calls from you because your stepfather's so tired of watching you play on her emotions, so she'll go down to her tiny little bank account and take a few more dollars out and send them to her little boy and see if that'll help him. He said, you've been going to AA off and on now for almost 10 years, and you're dying on the street. If he'd have said, why don't you go up back to Alcoholics Anonymous and admit you're an alcoholic and see what happens? And if someone had said that to me, I'd have to tell him, pal, you don't understand. I'm not really an alcoholic. I'll tell you something else. I really wish I was. My life would be so much more simple. Just to be like these boobs today, stop and drink and go through that regular has. But that's not my problem. I've got a lot of problems. I know that. I've had problems when I was a little boy. When I was a little boy, I remember thinking, there's something missing in me. I don't know what it is, but when I get close to people, they don't seem to like me as well, and I don't seem to fit in very well with groups. And the people I like to be with, I feel clumsy and awkward when I'm around them. And the people I get along with, not the people I want to get along. And I thought when I grow up, it's going to be all different. And I grew up, and it was different set of emotions, but there's still unease and dis-ease. And I did a lot of things. As I said, I spent a lot of money in trying to find what's wrong with these emotions. But the answer I got when I was a boy that I realized was my lifesaver. When I was 15 years old, the Second World War broke out. And I was about to be flunked out of high school because I was feeling upset. And I hitchhiked to San Francisco and lied my age. I was about this tall, had a face full of pimples, just a dumb little puke. And I got a ride. One guy gave me a ride from Minneapolis to San Francisco. I never would have made it. If he'd let me out somewhere, I'd have died there. And he was in the Navy. He's going back to a ship. And I said, I want to be in the Marine Corps and kill Japs. And he said, you're a little small, kid. Go to the merchant marine. They're taking anybody. All the good guys gone in the Navy, and they'll take anybody that's breathing. So I went in there, and I put down, he said, put down that you're 16, though. So I put down 16. I said, you're only 16 years old, kid. You have to have your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And that afternoon, I was on a ship going to the South Pacific. And on that ship, I was really dumb. And these guys were really, I look back now, really rotten, scum of the earth. I mean, pirates, if they're another generation. If you crossed them, you'd walk the plank, I feel. I mean, all the good guys had gone in the Navy. These were the guys who couldn't get in the Navy. I mean, these were really bad guys. And I was raised in a very strict Norwegian Lutheran church, and we were all, I mean, I was bad, but I was a prim bad. I mean, these guys were talking about what they would do with women, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, even at the age of 15, I'd had sex, but I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. These guys were doing it with people. Ooh. And I suddenly realized, of course, they've all got black hair. These are the Catholics I've heard about. Well, I had a lot of experiences on that ship. One of the experiences, they all drank and got drunk and raced hell they weren't supposed to. Who's going to stop them? One day the guy turned to me and says, "How about you, Junior? You think you're man enough for a little snort?" And I drew the line there. I'd let him treat me like a fool, but I'm not a sinner. I was just prepared to tell him, "You get that whiskey out of my face. I guess you don't know it, but I'm a Norwegian Lutheran. And I'm not a Catholic. And we don't drink whiskey, and I promised my mother and grandmother I wouldn't either. And I just wish you'd leave me alone and never mention that to me again." I knew he'd just turn white and probably collapse. And he said, "Well, how about it, Junior?" I heard a voice say, "God damn right." So I'm a little weak under pressure, too. But I threw up the drink I took, and they laughed at me. To this day, I don't know a feeling that's worse than public humiliation like that. You just, you can't hit them. I thought later, there's one thing I might have done to get revenge. I'm glad I didn't think of it. I'd have been thrown overboard, but it would have been cute. "Lean over, you." "Yeah. Take that." Just give him one in the old eye. But when nobody's around, I'd going across the ocean. We come into Pearl Harbor. Every day, when nobody's around, I'd sneak in, take a drink out of that bottle, and I'd throw it up. And I hated it, but I wanted to hold it down. And then I thought that'd make them think I was a man, which was ridiculous. They never thought I was a man. But the day I held one down, I didn't throw up.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And in about 3 minutes, all of a sudden, I found myself feeling significantly better. And I realized that's what makes you feel. I didn't think anything about it. Growing up is when you learn things. You learn what's good, what's bad. And I didn't become a terrible alcoholic. It was like discovering atomic energy. If I could learn to handle that baby, I'll be all right, you know? That's really what it's like, too, for people like me, and I'm sure like most of you. It is like atomic energy. When it works, it's just the wheels spin and everything is wonderful, but every so often, here we are at 3 Mile Island again, friends. Shit. But I drank all those years, and the only problem I ever had, because later on I went in the Navy, and at the end of the war I was in a naval hospital up in Northern California, and they passed out some tests, and I took a test, got me a high school diploma, and I went to Wisconsin after the war and won some trophies for the university, and went out in the world, became a sports writer, which to this day is the best job I had, but I'd fallen into evil hands. I'd married this Catholic girl. Seemed exotic to me, and she began turning out young at a hideous rate. You know, I became a national distributor of small Catholics. So I had to get better jobs. I got advertising and public relations, big companies. And all these years I drank and raised hell and smoked, had a lot of fun. The only problem is I have a tendency to drink too much sometimes. And it's puzzling to me because I don't intend to. And so I will quit. I hear, and pretty soon I drink again. I don't know why. And I was suggested I go to my first AA meeting by some friends in 1949. That's a long time ago. A lot of you little snots weren't even born. We love you. And I went to this AA meeting, a bunch of fat old guys sitting around a table. I thought I was back on the ship. The guy said, "What are you supposed to be?" And I didn't realize there was nobody within 30 years of me. I was 22 in that state who was in Alcoholics Anonymous. They were old guys. "What are you supposed to be?" I said, "I don't know. They suggested I come here." Said, "You think you're an alcoholic?" I said, "No, I really don't." "What the hell do you think's wrong with you?" I'm trying to be honest. I said, "I think I'm too sensitive." Listen to this, Lemoyne. I'll tell you, I never said that again for a long time. But I hung around day, and I went for a while, listened to these old guys. They explained what alcoholics are. And everyone, newcomers know that. Our newcomers tonight. There are people whose problem is alcohol. They come to AA, admit their problem is alcohol. They start working the steps, return to God, live pretty good after that. And their private lives get better. And I tried it, and my life didn't get better. Didn't get better at all. I went to their little meetings, and I finally left because they're kind of simple folk. They're nice folk, but they're simple. Well, keep coming back. Live and let live. Put the plug in the jug. Ha, 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 ha. Jesus Christ. You know any Spanish? How about adios, baby? You know. But I went to a different city, and I got to a big job, and I got to start drinking. They gave me some heat, so I went to AA and sat there till the heat was off, and did this for year after year after year. But one time I went down and didn't come back up. I was in Dallas, and my family left. They repossessed my car. In 1 week, I went from a big palatial office at a big advertising agency in Dallas to standing on the street corner holding all I had possessed in 2 bags. And the guy said, I'll give you a job driving my car to Los Angeles. And here I am being thrown out of a mission. And I wish I were an alcoholic, but I'm not. I knew how to get out of the rain, so I walked and asked for the A club. They said some place called Wilshire in Fairfax, wherever the hell that is. The guy said, well, Wilshire doesn't come down this far. You go up this hill to Hill Street, then cut over to Wilshire, then walk west. And if you've ever been down, that's a long way. That's 72 long blocks, and my mouth was bleeding and raining, and my clothes were torn and bloody and dirty. I didn't have any change. And I remember walking up Wilshire. Still remember cars going by and saying, look, that monstrosity going up there. And I got to this club, and I hated it. Same old crap, and same old steps, and same old traditions, and meaningless, and same old return to God. And I hung around there for a few days because it kept raining, and I played their sick little game with them, pretended to be interested, and tried to keep from vomiting. And I had no idea that'd be my sobriety date after all those years. Didn't intend for it to be, didn't want it to be. They always say, the only desire is a desire to stop drinking. I never had a desire to stop drinking. The one time I had a desire to stop drinking was I came out of jail one morning. I used to go to jail intermittently overnight. I'm no big felon, but I have one other phase of my personality. When I get to a certain amount of drinking, I find it necessary to counsel police officers. Point out errors in their performance. So I go to jail once in a while overnight for disorderly conduct. But I came out and the guy said, gee, you should have stayed home last night. Your little son died, and we couldn't find you. And I had a bunch of little girls and one little boy. That almost killed me. But at least I knew whose fault it was. It was that stinking God, because I was a sinner. And he killed my little sinless boy to punish me. What kind of a son of a bitch would do that? That was the end of God in my life. But I stopped drinking for my dead son. I put my hand in his grave, his casket, and said, I won't do this anymore, John. I won't drink. And I stayed sober. It got so bad finally that one day my wife was in church with the kids, and I just pulled the car in the garage and hooked up a hose to the exhaust pipe and committed suicide. I just couldn't find a way out of it. Because drinking is not my problem. I don't know how to explain that to people. And a neighbor saw me go in there and pulled me out, and they got me well enough to go to the nut house for a few months. But the reason I know I'm not an alcoholic is very simple. People say I stopped drinking, it's fine. And I can't quit, they say. I've quit so many times. My problem is when I quit, sooner or later somebody seems to put a little spring in my gut. Somebody sneaks into my bedroom and does that. And the next morning they start to tighten it. And it comes out as just a little growing restlessness, just a little irritability, just a little tired of people giving me these damn lectures and sermons. I'm supporting you and saving your company. Don't give me that baloney. And the pressure mounts, and I've tried a lot of things to break that pressure, but I'll tell you what breaks it is 2 or 3 drinks. And I take them eventually. They're playing our song. I take them, but not because I'm a drinker. I take them because I'm a feeler. Now, I'm not an alcoholic. Wish I were. And I often thought, why would I stay sober this time when I never stayed sober before? And as far as I can tell, I'll tell you the worst series of reasons. It kept raining, and I kept hanging around this club because there's no place for me to go. And the manager says, you're supposed to be a member to be in here during the day, but you're such a mess, you can come in here if you go to the meetings every night. And oh, God, that's almost wanted to stay out in the rain rather than do that, take that, listen to these pukes, talk to their simpletons. But I saw a movie actor who used to come to these meetings. Hey, a movie actor. And I was kind of impressed. I didn't know any movie actor. I'd seen him in the movies. And I found out later, years later, he's just a second-rate character actor. No actor. I've been in more movies than he has. But at that time, I had, oh boy. And I thought, he must be rich and famous. Maybe I can get him to help me. And after about 3 or 4 days, people started on these meetings. Time to get a sponsor. Got a sponsor yet? No, but I will have soon. I went to Bob after that. I said, Bob, I'm a newcomer, and I admire your program very much. Would you be my sponsor? He said, sure, kid, but I want you to do what I tell you. Oh, sure, Bob. They said he wasn't a very good actor. He was an excellent actor because he really seemed like a nice guy in the meetings, and he was acting then, I'll tell you. He turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig of the worst sort. Do this. And I thought, why am I taking this crap? Because he was my ticket out of there, that's why. I really had a good plan. I'll get some money from this simpleton. I'll get some teeth. I'll get some clothes. I'll go back to New York. I'll go to a big agent and say, yeah, I know I had some bad time drinking, but I had some good times before that. How about giving me a chance? I'll work for nothing till you feel you can trust me. And they'll put me to work, and I'll work for nothing, and I'll eat him up. Pretty soon I'll make some big dough, and I'll save it. I'll come back to Los Angeles, and I'll buy the AA club, and I'll burn it down. And I may wait till the day they're having an all-club meeting in there. And I found out later he tried to help me, but I was a terrible patient. I guess it's safe to say, I don't mean to say this egotistically, but I was the worst type of alcoholic newcomer there is in AA. And I know it now because I've had 2 or 3 of them in the last few years to try to sponsor. God, they're rotten. And I'll tell you who they are. People who've been to AA again and again, have heard everything, know all the answers, and keep drinking. And every time you tell me something, you say, yeah, I know that. I remember saying to Bob things like, that's very interesting what you said there, Bob, but I think you misquoted the book, didn't you? Jesus. But he tried to help me. But somewhere along the line, I heard him say something one day that really caught my ear. He said, a lot of people around here think their problem is alcohol, and as long as they think that, they're going to die drunk. I said, what the hell is that about now, Bob? I asked him about that. And he gave me a long description of why that was. He says, if your problem is alcohol, you don't need AA. Oh, what do you need, Bob? Psycho-cybernetics? What the hell is that? Belong to Screen Actors Guild? He said, no. Look, if your problem is alcohol, what you do, you quit drinking and clean up your act, and that's all that's required. However, if you're one of the people like me, presume you are, you will discover that if you stop drinking, it has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. It's something called alcoholism. I said, Jesus, Bob, don't play word games with me. I look troubled, but I'm smart. Alcoholism. Yeah. And he really, shut up, he explained. But I remember we got talking about that, and I really, after a while, I was listening to what he said. And I said, Jesus, alcoholism, why would people have it? He said, because it looks exactly like an alcohol problem to the naked eye. But it's a mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding thing. He said, and people have to drink. I said, well, why would people drink if alcohol is doing so many terrible things to them? He said, that's the whole point, kid. You got to remember. We don't drink it because it's doing terrible things to us. When that happens, it's way down the road. We drink it because it's doing wonderful things for us. Now, what is that, Bob? He said, stop and think. When I have a few drinks, it literally alters my perception of reality. When I have a few drinks, it changes my relationship to the world around me. It makes me taller and more self-contained, and them smaller and less threatening. It's great. I said, Jesus, Bob, what's wrong with that? I was going to say, you hadn't been up during this talk yet. I'm glad to see you making it. Yeah. He says, because it's fantasy, it's not really happening. It's in your mind. And then it sets up this phenomenon of craving, and nobody understands that. Then you just keep drinking. And there's never has been an explanation of this phenomenon of craving. I have a theory of it, at least for me. It may not be for anybody else, but I don't know. I think I know why I have the craving. It's because when I get there, when a few drinks and I'm feeling good, what happens is there's almost an instant beginning of a sag. And you keep drinking to hold it. You see guys so drunk they can't even stand up screaming for a drink. They don't want to drink, they want to hold that. But eventually you get drunk and you can't hold it, you get sober again. But I think that's, when I'm in the Technicolor, I want to keep it there, boy. And I said, well, okay, Bob, so if another girl gets sober, then why would they drink again? He said, that's another thing, kid, you got to understand this. And somebody gave me a tape that I made when I was 3 years sober, a long time ago. And I mentioned something he had told me, and I'd forgotten all about it for 30-some years. But it's such a great philosophy, I believe it to be true. He said, when people grow up, they face things in life. They face conflicts, problems, situations, good things, bad things. They learn what they can do, what they can't do. They learn what makes them hurt. They learn all sorts of things. That is called maturing. And when you become a mature personality, you live a rather comfortable life. You know what hurts you. You're going to stay away from that. You learn what is good for you. You know how to get along with people. You know how to raise children. All these things. It just comes with maturity. He says this almost never happens to alcoholics. I said, why, Bob? He says, because when they face problems and conflicts, they drink to get rid of them. Here's to you, household finance. Here's to you, bitch. I never liked you anyway. And you go on your way. Eventually your drinking gets bad and you got to stay sober now. You got to stay sober. I never would have realized this in my life on my own in 10,000 years. Here I am with a grown-up body, grown-up brain, grown-up skill, grown-up ability, grown-up verbal ability, and never once knowing that it all at the intermittent beck and call of childish emotions. Now, we call them alcoholic emotions because that sounds a little nicer. Oh, I guess that's my alcoholism. That's your childishness. What are alcoholic emotions? I love you. I hate you. I'm going to run away. Let's get married. Yeah. If you want to see alcoholic emotions, stop by a schoolyard in the morning. Mine. And pretty soon it gets so uncomfortable you have to get some relief. And pretty soon you have to drink. Some psychiatrists say you get to a point where literally you must drink to preserve your sanity. And you drink until you have to get sober. You stay sober till you have to drink. Drink till you have to get... Every time back and forth your brain says, see, it wasn't the alcohol at all. It's all these other things people don't understand. Your case truly is different. They don't understand. And that's why most people like us will die from this. Because there's no sense doing this kind of simple stuff when it doesn't work for people like me. I said, Jesus, Bob, what you explained there, that's the story of my life. I've been doing that all my adult life. He says, there's a name for people like you. I said, what is it, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic. And I thought, I'll be damned. I've just spent 10 years of my life. I had every chance in the world to really be something, and it's all gone with the wind. I said, damn it, Bob, why doesn't AA explain these things the way you did? Instead of all this obsession of the mind and allergy of the body and cravings and crap, why don't they talk about the way you talk about it? He says, they do, kid. Read up there. What you have to admit is that you're having a problem with alcohol, and you're having a problem without alcohol. I said, But that's what it says. And if anybody's new here tonight, I can almost guarantee you that you're an alcoholic. Because if you could still drink, you'd be out there drinking. If you could stay sober comfortably, you'd be out there staying sober comfortably. When you can't do either, you come here and say your case is different. I always think the analogy is like woman going to a gynecologist, going to a baby doctor and saying, I need an examination. He says, examines her, I've got some wonderful news for you, Mrs. Brown. She said, I'm Miss Brown. I have some bad news for you, Miss Brown. She says, you mean I'm pregnant? I can't be. Doctor, what kind of a girl do you think I am? I've never been touched. He said, just a minute. She says, what are you doing now? The last time this happened, there was a star in the east. I don't want to miss it. And that's the way it is with being an alcoholic. And the other thing I want to mention quickly, that was in January of 1959. I never really had a severe desire to drink since then. My life was terrible, but I didn't want to drink because now that I'm an alcoholic, I knew a slip would make it worse. I heard all these stories over the years about slips. So I said a little line, I will not drink, but I'll give myself permission to commit suicide. And it almost did a couple of times, but not quite. And I finally had a little job. But I didn't know how to explain to him. I could not return to God. I could not return to God. I was raised in a strict church, and when you break 3 or 4 commandments, you've done a bad thing. I broke 10 commandments out of 10. Some of them I didn't mean to, but I did. And I knew God killed my son to punish me. God would destroy anything around me. I can't stand, I will not conceive of God. And they started talking about the steps. I said, Bob, I cannot return to God. Don't give me that. He says, nothing in AA ever asks you to return to God, kid. Oh, to a power greater than myself, Bob. Does that fool the other boys and girls? We know who they're talking about, don't we? He says, it doesn't say that at all. Read the damn step. It says, you got to come to believe in something. Can't you believe in God? And I said, no, I can't, Bob. He says, can't you believe in AA? I said, no. Parts of it, I like to love some AA members, but it's too religious. I cannot do that. He said, you think I'm doing better than you are? Of course you are. He said, congratulations, I'm your new higher power. And people would laugh and say, there's that crazy bastard thinks his sponsor's God. I knew he wasn't God. He couldn't send me to hell. He tried, but he couldn't. But he got me to do little things. I got little jobs, and he'd talk me through them little by little. And little by little, he began telling me things. And one of the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life, I can see in retrospect, and I never could see it then, I began to believe that he knew how I felt. I never knew another person that I can remember in my life who I really knew that they knew how I felt. And that is such a thing. You think, well, you get good advice. Now, we've all got enough advice in this to last us 10,000 years. Everyone in the world gives people like us advice. But if you have somebody who you believe knows how you feel, that advice becomes meaningful information. And you may do things that you would never do based on any advice you ever got. Now, and sponsors, if you got a good sponsor, will tell you stupid things. Stupid things. Stupid things. Now, they won't ever tell you this, but it's the same type of thing. See that wall? That wall is bright red. No, it isn't, Bob. For Christ's sake, it's light tan. I tell you, it's bright red. Looks like light tan. Well, you act like it's bright red. Now, they don't tell you things. They don't tell you colors of walls. They tell you things even more stupid. I don't care how it looks to you. Apologize to that woman. You call her a bitch. She is a bitch, Bob. Why do you think she's a bitch? She told her new girls to stay away from me. Well, she's right. You apologize. Sorry. Bitch. I don't care how it looks to you. You stay on that job till you get a better one. Jesus, Bob. They got me stuffing envelopes for $1.09 an hour. I used to be a big, big man. I got abilities and skills, and I'm stuffing envelopes for $1.09 an hour. Well, nobody cares. Just do it till you get a better job. I heard you haven't been going to the Friday night meeting. Oh, Bob, it's just a big clique, an in-group, and they all suck around each other. You know, and they're cute, and they just treat you like a piece of crap. Or maybe they know something. You go to that meeting. And this goes on and on and on and on till you're almost crazy with these nuts. And one day you turn around and the wall has turned red. You have to spend the rest of your life dealing with dumbbells who think it's light tan. But I came to believe in him, and he got me to, I believed in my higher power, and I did things to please him I wouldn't have done for my father or for any Jesus. And over a period of time, my perceptions changed. The wall changed color. I eventually came to believe in AA as my higher power when he died. Eventually, I got another sponsor, a guy named Chuck C. down Laguna Beach, and he inspired me to try to pray one night. And little by little, over a long period of time, I don't have time to talk about it, but I found myself coming to believe not only that God didn't hate me, but that he loved me exactly as much as he loves you, no more, no less. Why do some of us don't do very well? He said, because we got to take actions that wrench our damn brain open so some God's grace can get in from time to time. It isn't going to last long. And eventually I wrote an inventory I swore never write. And I made amends to my father, a man I hated, never talked to for 10 years. Did a lot of things. And little by little, my life changed. And now got some jobs I held finally. Another guy that we brought in Hollywood. We created something called Boss Radio. We became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We were just all slicker than snot on a doorknob, I'll tell you. Hey, baby, what's coming on down? And I got a job as downtown, big public relations firm. I was 15 years old. I was a marketing director in a Beverly Hills firm. And one day, AA had so warped my head that I found myself resigning that job in Beverly Hills. And for the last 31 years, I've been the managing director of the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people would say to me, why would you give up this great career on that damn mission? I could never think of a good answer. Well, for such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. Yeah. I'm still looking for those two guys that threw me out. Once I get them, I'll be gone. It's a funny thing today. I live out here by the ocean. All of us do. I drive downtown and step over the bodies of men and women and children, just like I used to be on that sidewalk every morning. Step over them every night. We're trying to find ways to help them. We're not a treatment center. We're way below that, trying to keep them alive. But it's a funny thing, when I go home from there at night, I always feel more like a man than I ever did going on those elevators, popping my fingers. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I'm not telling you to get a mission. There's only so many go around. I got mine, and what I'm telling you to remember, especially you new people, AA is not designed to make you drier and drier and drier. I've been sober 46 years. If that were the case, I'd burst into flame up here. You know, I believe this with all my heart. The purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to very slowly do what alcohol did fast. To little by little change my perception of reality, to change my relation to the world around me, to build up my inner self so I'm not afraid of everything that goes by me, to live with some degree of peace. And nobody can keep it perfect, because no matter how well you work your program, nobody ever rises above human being, and they're full of faults and emotions and problems sometimes. Every one of us eventually will have a day where by 10 o'clock in the morning, you know, there's just no hope for this day. This day is rotten. So you just keep your mouth shut and come on, midnight. Come on, midnight. Get to a meeting and to hell with them. But the purpose of it is to live with some degree of dignity. And I tell you, now I said, Irene, your name is branded on my heart, I just couldn't read it. Irene got sober and feels well. I got sober and feel well. I almost died getting sober. She stayed sober. But still, the net result is here. If you're an alcoholic of our type, you will never stay sober out there alone. No one has ever done it. You come in here, do the things. I hope, if God gave me the power to give you a gift, the one gift I'd give you, I hope you can find someone who you believe knows how you feel and do what they say. And you'll be awfully glad you did. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.